Hey guys, TommyBryson here, and if you're watching this video and you're wondering, should I focus on paying off my student loan debt? Or should I focus on investing? Or should I do both? The answer is, there is a clear winner here, and I'll tell you which one I chose. And by the way, I chose to pay off my student loan debt in full. And by the way, I made the mistake of trying to do both. I made the mistake of trying to say I'm just gonna do one, but overall, this is not going to come down to a mathematical decision, because mathematically, it is never going to make sense. Hear me out. It is never going to make sense for you to actually pay off a low interest debt instead of grabbing that money and actually invest in it. However, there is no way I recommend for you to actually keep your student loan debt around. And by the way, I did not learn this by experience, in the sense that I made some big mistake and then and only then I learned my lesson. That's not how I learned. You'll learn later on in this video what actually happened to me, but for the most part, in 2020, just before the pandemic happened, I had the equivalent of the amount of money I needed in cash to pay off all of my student loan debt. And at the time, it was around $20,000 to $21,000. And when the stock market actually crashed, I went ahead and I wasn't worried about my debt. I was basically worried about, I want to get in on this market dip. And what I did was I invested that $20,000. And today, that money is worth about 2x. So when I bought in, it was around between $220 to $240 per share. Today, those same investments are selling for like around $430 if I'm not mistaken, meaning I made a lot of money. Until this day, I still regret not paying off my student loan debt then. Although mathematically, I made a good decision, but by the end of this video, you'll know exactly why not everything in life is about math and numbers, okay? Because you also have to include probability, quality of life, and the stress certain things actually cost you. Now, if you guys don't know me, my name is TommyBryson. Do me a favor and smash the like button. Now, the very first thing, guys, is I want to share with you guys what I call realistic expectations. Whenever you hear stories, you never hear the full, complete stories. People are always trying to make themselves seem like they're guru or geniuses, but I'm here to tell you I am neither one of those things, okay? What actually happened is this. During that time, I had invested, I think, over 6 figures when it came to my investments. But at the same time, I had around $70,000 worth of debt. And this debt was basically low interest debt. A part of it was for a business loan, a part of it was for student loan debt, and a part of it was interest. It was actually paused on some consumer revolving debt. And the idea was that I said to myself, I can keep investing, and only pay off the debt when it's required for me to actually pay it. Mathematically, it would never make sense. I ran the numbers, okay? And if I pay off my student loan debt and $20,000, boom, instead of leaving that money there and basically letting it compound for 40 years, I can make so much money off of it, okay? So here is the math. If I owed $20,000 in student loan debt for 10 years, I would be paying around $207 a month. Over time, I would have basically paid off the principal in 10 years, and I would have paid about $4,873 in interest. However, if I grabbed that same $20,000 and invested it for 10 years at a 10% return, I would end up with around $51,874. What's the difference here? I would have a profit of around $27,000. So you see, paying this off today wouldn't make sense. Investing instead would make sense. Mathematically, though, mathematically. Back to the video. But again, a lot of things happen in 20 to 30 to 40 years, but usually we only think about the positive. Now, here's another thing that most people are not going to tell you. Although during the pandemic, I made a lot of money, I could only see that now today in hindsight. And the market only took a short while to actually recover. But do you guys know that the last time, well, at a point in time, it took the market approximately like 25 years to actually recover? That could have potentially happened. So yes, I put money into the market. I made 2x in less than 3 years, while the average investment at 8% takes around 9 years to actually double. I actually did it in 3 years, and I made 2x instead of just 1x, which is actually crazy. But the idea is, wow, that's awesome. But that, my friends, for the most part, was probably going to be luck. Yes, I knew what I was doing in a sense, but I got lucky that it didn't take the market 10 to 20 years. How do I know that? Because there were so many unknowns. When was there a pandemic? How did I know it was actually going to happen? And a lot smarter investors were actually being a lot more conservative, like Warren Buffett getting out of the airline industry because he did not know how it was going to affect it. And by the way, I also made 128% on Delta. I made a lot of money on my investments during the time of the pandemic, and I still regret not paying off my student loan debt because it was probably the dumbest decision. Because guess what? I could have also lost all of my income. That could have happened. Who knew what could actually happen, okay? But I was so positive. And just because I got a positive result does not mean my attitude was correct. I want to clarify that, okay? Because everyone makes it seem like, well, if you made a decision that was risky and you got a good result, you were smart. No, I was an idiot at the time because it was such an uncertain time, and I go ahead, instead of basically deleveraging myself, I go ahead and basically invest money like crazy into an uncertain stock market. I also go ahead and not worry about my job, and I think I barely had any money in my emergency account because I just kept investing and investing basically all of the money, which is actually super risky and super dumb. And by the way, I also want to add something that a lot of people aren't really going to tell you either. But the truth is, guys, okay, my income, I could have lost it. My investments could have been on pause for a very long time until a recovery. But my debt and my payments, they were going to be there no matter what. Those things were not going to change. Now, thankfully, I got lucky. The government intervened and said, hey, no student loan payments for like the next 2 years or whatever. And then they said, we're going to forgive it. My student loans were never forgiven, by the way. I had to pay them out of my pocket. And I'm glad I did because I'm glad I learned my lesson, not by hurting myself or basically making mistakes, but by basically seeing and understanding what the best choice actually was. And by the way, to make this choice, I had two great examples. I had Dave Ramsey, someone that went bankrupt, and his response was, I'm not gonna do that again, create a bunch of leverage, buy a bunch of things I really can't have, and basically put my family at risk. I'm never going into debt again. Today, Dave Ramsey is worth millions. Is that going to be your result? The answer is, I don't know. Most likely not, honestly. Most people are not going to get to Dave Ramsey level. But the point is, his attitude change was no debt. I learned my lesson. The juice is not worth the squeeze. Then you had Grant Cardone. He went through a massive struggle, and his response was, I'm going to double, triple, quadruple, 10x down, and just get into even more debt, and basically force the banks into not being able to close on me, which is drastically stupid. I'm not here to tell you basically, hey, you have Dave Ramsey, you have Grant Cardone, what you want to find is somewhere in the middle to operate. The answer is no. I think Grant Cardone is wrong. I think Dave Ramsey is right. And I'm siding with Dave Ramsey on this, okay? And that's the side I am, okay? And by the way, I don't agree with all the particularities when it comes to Dave Ramsey, like investing into mutual funds and so on. But for the most part, I agree when it comes to no debt whatsoever. And that was basically the best choice that I could have made. Now, number two, guys, is this. The borrower is slave to the lender. I could not have said it myself. You know, it's in the Bible. It's great. It's a great Bible verse. I think it's Proverbs 20 something. Just look it up on Google. You'll find it. I'll put it down right here. Here it is for you guys, okay? But overall, it's very true. The borrower is slave to the lender. You can make yourself sound super sophisticated, like, Tommy, this is leverage. I know what I'm doing. In 10, 20 years, I'll be able to pay this off on its own, blah, blah, blah. But people always put things into perspective as the best result is bound to happen. They never really basically calculate, what if something bad happens? Is it actually worth me putting myself into a bad situation instead of just dealing with this now and then doing this later? People usually want the benefits now without the basically having to fix things early on. What I mean is this, okay? I could have easily paid off my student loan debt and be done with it. Again, this is not a mathematical issue. mathematically, it is never going to make sense to pay off low interest debt versus invest and make 8-10% when you're paying somebody 3 to 5%. Okay, it makes no sense mathematically. But when it comes to having peace and having a less stressful life, and making sure that you don't have to worry about a lot of things, it is always going to make sense to clear off all of those things, because in reality, they're not worth the benefit that you think you're going to get from them. I could have said, hey, I'm going to spend this time to pay off all of my debt. Boom. I would have done that. I would have not invested all the money that I would have into the stock market, but I still would have invested a good chunk of money. And guess what? Till this day, I could have still been invested into the stock market and still cut up. It's not like, for example, everyone is into this massive rush, and I don't really know why, and I don't really know where they're heading. But for the most part, you think about it, okay? Let's say you're in your 30s or in your 40s, and you're wondering about pay off my student loan debt or keep investing. The answer is, if you take 5 to 7 years to pay off your debt, and then you still have, for example, another 23 to 30 more years to actually keep investing, what are you losing out on, okay? You're not really losing out on anything whatsoever. Most likely in those 5 to 7 years is going to take you to pay off your student loan debt. You're not going to build some empire. That's usually not going to happen, okay? So for the most part, what do you prefer actually doing? Building up more risks and building up more, increasing the probability you're actually going to fail, or using the time you have to actually decrease the probability you're going to fail and decrease the amount of debt you actually have? To me, it's better to decrease the debt you have over those 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. Be done with that part and then focus on the wealth building part without all the leverage and risk attached to it, okay? And by the way, these days, I don't have student loan debts. I don't have personal loan debts. I don't have credit card or revolving debt or any of that stuff. And I don't worry about points. You know, some of my friends tell me, Tommy, the only reason people shouldn't get credit cards is because people are just irresponsible. But I'm responsible. And I'm like, how much money you spent last month? They're like, I don't know, but I paid it off, all right? No, you're not responsible. You know, these things are built and created by people to actually manipulate you, psychologically. And the point is, these people, when they work together, usually going to be a lot more smarter than you. And you're using a product that, what do you get? 2 points, 1 point, 3 points back when you spend a bunch of money. And how much money are you actually going to get? Not a lot, you know? So for the most part, the juice is just not worth the squeeze, okay? That is the idea behind this. Now, these days, how do I live? How do I do? The answer is, these days, I don't have any debt whatsoever, aside from the taxes I have to pay like everyone else, and aside from some utility bills I still owe after I moved from Puerto Rico over to Dominican Republic, which I should get that sorted, and I will eventually get that sorted. But I don't have any credit card debt. I don't have some looming student loan debt over me. I don't have any leverage going on where I'm trying to have this thing pay for this thing, but if this doesn't work, then I gotta find money over here. I don't have any of those complexities in my financial life whatsoever. Now, do I believe that you should never borrow money? The answer is, for the most part, yes. But you should, and most likely, I recommend you actually borrow money when it comes to purchasing a home, because it's so expensive that it's going to keep you off of investing for like decades if you're not careful. But when you do buy a home, you should buy a home correctly. A home you can afford to pay off in less than 15 years, whereas no more than 30% of your monthly net income on, and you're paying around and you're putting down around at least a 10 to 20% down payment. And when you actually do that, you'll own the home a lot faster. While everybody is building up a fancy lifestyle with things they can't afford and things they don't own, you'll just be working things over, study and building up your financial future little by little. So again, if you came to this video to seek out an answer mathematically, it makes no sense to pay off your student loans over investing. Logically, and for the betterment of your life, in my opinion, and what was actually best for me, and for peace, and for less stress, and for less worry, and for less leverage, for less risk, it will make absolute sense to just be debt-free and not deal with those things. That is my opinion. And when you think about it logically, how long is it going to take you to get debt-free? Maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years max? And then how much longer do you have to invest? Probably a lot longer. And what's the probability now you're going to be investing without having to dip into your investments? It's going to be a lot higher, because you don't have to worry about making payments anymore. Remember, your investments can always go down, your income can always go down, but the money you owe and the payments will always stay the same unless the government steps in, which is usually unlikely, and you should not depend on that. Thanks for watching, guys. If you're interested in more videos, here is another one. Subscribe, and peace.